I'm Chad Ruthermond,
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
and welcome to NOCLIP Pocket, the real one. Today, we're going to be talking about Anodyne, a game that was developed and published by Analgesic Productions, released in 2013 on Windows, Mac OS, Linux, iOS, and Android, and in 2018 on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Switch.
But first, if you can give us a like or a rating, it would be greatly appreciated.
So Anodyne is an action adventure game, and one that obviously takes its cues from the 2D top-down Legend of Zelda games.
Right. I think kind of specifically Link's Awakening is what the developers have said.
Yeah, and that's a wholly separate topic of discussion, because the developers of this game are two people, but then there was a remaster produced and put out, presumably in 2018.
Yeah.
And that had a whole other team. And then now, in the year of our Lord 2023, there's in fact even an Anodyne 2. And I don't know when that one came out.
I think
I don't
couple
know
years
if that
ago.
game is... That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if that one was developed by the original developers or the remaster team or a combination of them. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's the original team, but it might be more people. So, who knows? I don't.
Yeah, it's a complete mystery.
Yeah, Anodyne 2, I don't know if you've seen what it looks like at all. But
it
it's
looks
like,
very different than the original.
It's like a 3D game, which is like a PS1 kind of art style.
Right, which did not go well when Hyperlight Drifter's developer tried to do that. So I'm not sure how well that'll pan out, but I don't know. Let us know. Should we cover Anodyne 2?
Mm-hmm.
Drop it in the comments. Engagement. So yeah, Anodyne is like this Zelda-like, and it was weird for me for a couple of reasons, because one, this game has been out for 1 million years.
10 years.
9 years.
Yeah,
10 years. And I just I've known about it at various times.
Mm-hmm.
Never played it. But had built up sort of an idea of what the game was going to be in my head prior to playing it. And that really, or it probably is, but it is more deep in its own thing than I expected it to be. I was expecting something more akin to like a Night in the Woods style of storytelling in the game. And I just knew that it was a Zelda game, it was an indie game, and that it was known for being like kind of a personal sort of story.
Mm-hmm.
And after playing the game, I did not realize that it was like a little freaky boy with lots of weird shit going on in it. I was almost pleasantly surprised because of how wild some of this game is.
Yeah. I had a kind of similar, kind of different experience with it. Like, I heard about it forever ago, just because I like Zelda a lot, and there was like a period of time before Breath of the Wild came out where I just had like an itch to play Zelda, and looked up all the Zelda style games that I could, and I came across this one and kind of just expected it to be more like exactly like Zelda. Just like a very like true to Zelda indie game, and
right.
Yeah, and then like I just kind of never played it, and then a couple years ago, I think like somebody did a review of it, and I like watched the first like minute or two, and they were like, "Oh, it's like this kind of mysterious, atmospheric kind of game," and I'm like, "Oh, that seems like even more interesting to me than it already was now." So like maybe I'll put that on the podcast list.
If listeners of the podcast know anything about you, it's that you love a mysterious game.
Yes.
Not necessarily a game about a mystery, but a game that has an air of mystery around it.
1000%.
And yeah, I went into this, I would say, mostly blind.
Mm-hmm.
And so the air of mystery for me was very real. It was exactly what it was.
Yeah, like especially like the way it starts out, like you go through this little tutorial zone, and then you're dropped in like this underpass, like in this like kind of more like quote realistic environment than in not like a fantasy one like you might be expecting. Which
Right.
is it a weird tone? Like we just finished doing like our Halloween games for October, and then when I got booted this one up, I'm like, oh, is this gonna be like spookier than I expected? You know, because it kind of starts off like a little bit of an eerie tone. And then after you do like the first dungeon, you get dropped into the lake area, which is more like what I was expecting. So like, yeah, I think the game does do a good job of like being unexpected and surreal.
Yeah, like obviously gameplay wise, the game takes a lot from Link's Awakening. I guess not really a lot, but like you could see the inspiration, like
Yeah,
where
like
it's coming from.
the aspect ratio is closer to like a Game Boy screen.
Yeah. But then the other thing though is that tonally and like thematically, this feels way more related to Earthbound than it does to a Zelda game. And that took me off guard as well.
Yeah, it's got like silly dialogue. Like there's that bear that tells you how many times he's had sex or whatever. Yeah, like it does. It kind of like juggles different tones and like has surreal elements. There's the one area, I think it's the one with like the cube kings that can rest on the ledge without falling off. That has the background that looks a little bit like the Gygus kind of an Earthbound background. So yeah, it's definitely in there.
Which also leads into the apartment building dungeon.
Yeah.
Which is very an Earthbound thing. You're fighting like rats and cockroaches and stuff.
Yeah, and it's got like the more like modern like towns and like you fight with a broom and stuff. Like when I was playing it, I couldn't help but wonder if like this was at all like an influence on Undertale, because there were like a few points where I was like, this feels like a little reminiscent, like a little. I could see a little bit of inspiration coming from this.
And I could also see Toby Fox playing this game, so that does seem likely. But still, like obviously shared kin being Earthbound there, like that is. A game that was obviously played by both developers and taken from in different ways. And to me, like, I feel like every element, like, this game has a lot going on in it, and I feel like it's spread very thin. I feel like there's little bits of a lot of things. It's a hodgepodge of tone and of substance, because there is like a horror part of the game that we could talk about later. And one of the main characters in the game shows up and is like, I'm just peddling my wares. Wares is the name of my bicycle. And they just take that joke to the very last minute of the game. And so there's like this comedy element to it, and then there's the horror, there's the realism, there's also the like natural world or the fantasy parts, and all of that is sort of like justified because the game takes place within a dream.
Right. Also very Link's Awakening.
Very true, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the big skyfish.
Then there's the windfish that shows up.
The windfish. I really should have thought, when that happened, I should have thought Wink's Awakening.
That was the working title for the game?
It's the subtitle for Anodyne 2. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of like my initial like thesis on it is like, this game has a lot of parts to it. And it does make the game very interesting. Yeah. So I will give it that for sure.
Yeah, I think this game started out as a student project by the two developers. And it does kind of have that energy of like, we got to put all our ideas in here because we don't know if we'll ever, get a chance to make another thing.
That is true.
It has that energy a little bit.
It does not, however, have group project vibes.
No.
Which is what the bouncer had.
Yeah, it's a little bit more cohesive than that. Just two people.
Yeah. And it does come off, like it does show. And we played the remaster, which has been polished and changed a bit. So I can't speak specifically to how the original game plays, but like you could definitely tell that it was like put together in such a way as to make it easy to create more content for it and build out a game from a simple set of mechanics. You don't get, like, unlike in Zelda, you don't get a bunch of items.
Mm-hmm.
You mostly only have 2 abilities, like attack and jump.
Right.
For the majority of the game, you get swap at the end. And to me, I thought that was it's very simplistic, but it makes going through the game allowing you to focus more on sort of the tone of what's going on and what are actually very well, in my opinion, very well designed dungeons.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think with those as the focus of the gameplay, like, I think it does a really good job of making something that's actually fun to do.
Yeah, it's more about, like, that exploration. It's got, like, a little bit of, like, Metroidvania DNA. Not that you have to come back with new abilities as much, but yeah, there are parts where you're like, you can jump over a thing that you couldn't before, or like jump off a ladder where you didn't realize you could, or, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, it's kind of like a little bit more of like an easy to get into, like, discovery kind of thing that the game's kind of built around.
Yeah, I feel like you get a lot of times you'll hear people talk about, like, oh, this game rewards exploration, or it has a focus on exploration. And I think that it's become sort of like almost not a subgenre, like a super genre, where a lot of games now want to build out these big worlds and have things for the player to explore. And then we're getting more and more refined in how we fill those worlds out and make them actually worthwhile to explore. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see in 2013 a game like this that I will say does reward exploration and has exploration as a part of it, but do it in a minimalist way. Like, you don't have to spend a huge amount of time just wandering around, but it is still rewarding and fun to just go to places that you haven't been to yet.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that it almost kind of does like an old school, like 3D platformer style incentivizing of exploration, but with the cards. Yeah, you could compare them to like Power Stars or Moons or Jiggies or whatever.
Yeah, I would compare them to music notes in that at the end of the game it goes, "Hey, did you get enough of these? If not, leave and go do that."
Yeah. Which I did not have enough. I had to go back.
No, yeah, me neither. And like, to me, like, given if you allow me to give the game its normal, like, this is an indie game when it came out, made by a smaller team, I'm gonna be applying these, like, exceptions to it. Like, I'm not holding it to the same standard or quality that I would a game that was made on a much bigger budget or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
In that lens, I feel like the game's one major stumbling block was that, essentially. Forcing you to go back and pick up collectibles. Like, I was off by, like, 11, which I feel like is kind of a lot.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I thought you would have had more than me, naturally.
No.
I had 29, so I needed 7 more, I think.
Yeah. So I had to go back and just sort of, like, go to the Nexus, which is called the Nexus. I'm not making a Dark Souls reference. And then find where there isn't a glowy stone and go into that one and then just amble around and look for something.
Yeah, I just went straight to the wiki.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, like, I just, like, looked up, like, pulled up my set of cards, like, which one am I missing, go to it on the wiki, and, like, where is this? I was like, I'm not gonna fuck around.
Right.
I did find a few, like, there's, like, the girl who's peddling her wares. Gives you hints. So I did grab a couple myself, but then as soon as there was a little bit of, like, aimless wandering, I went to the wiki.
I went to the wiki when I realized that I was going to have to go to Maze Zone. And I was like, well,
like the
maybe
8-bit area.
Yeah. I was like, I could probably get cards somewhere else other than Maze Zone. Because, that zone could suck my whole ass. I hated it so much. But But yeah, that is here and also there, and maybe we should just talk about it more when we get toward the end of the game. Uh, did this game? I assume the answer to this is yes, but I could be wrong. Hypothetically, did this game when you booted it up and you get your broom and you're like ready to go on a swashbuckling adventure? Did it grab you right away, like, and make you want to keep playing it?
I think so. I don't know if it was after I got the broom and started the swashbuckling adventure. But I think right off the bat, like, you wake up in like the abstract zone, go through the little tutorial, you're in the underpass, and like there's like a nexus with the weird sage. Like, I think tonally and atmospherically it grabbed me right away. And the mechanical side, like the Zelda stuff, was what I was expecting. So like that wasn't a deterrent.
Right. Well, I don't mean like due to because like when you start the game, everyone's gonna be a little bit trepidatious.
Right.
Any game at all. And I think that when I got off and started to actually experience like what the game is, I was like, oh, okay, all right, hell yeah. Like, I was so into it from the beginning. And I think that I attribute it mostly to, that, like, it's the tone, it's the way that they introduce everything. Like, I loved that it dumped you out onto a road. Because I didn't know what the game was going to be like. I knew that your character was like a guy with glasses on, which isn't very fantasy. So I was, like, into it right away. And I was a little surprised by it because it's an older game mimicking an even older game.
Right.
And I'm always very hesitant with this because it feels like, I don't know, I've been burned before.
Yeah. No, yeah, I feel like it put a good foot forward. Like, it got right into it. It's not like you have to do the opening part, and then once you get to, like, past the first dungeon, like, then it gets good. Like, I think it starts off right away. So, yeah, it grabbed me, too.
Yeah, I was very impressed by it. I think it's just the only reason I wanted to call it out.
So, what do you think about the platforming and the jumping being integrated into, like, the puzzles and dungeons?
We haven't talked about what categories we're doing for the NOCLIP Awards this year, but this might be a contender for the best use of platforming in a non-platforming game for me. And mostly because I felt like half the time that I made a jump, I felt like I wasn't supposed to be able to make the jump because you have a lot of weird momentum that the game confusingly does like simulate. So I was able to like jumping diagonally across things or like moving in air to go around obstacles where maybe that was the intended way and maybe it wasn't. I had fun with it, I would say. I thought it was good.
Yeah. It's like where you can, if you time the jump correctly, or I guess maybe wrong, you can actually jump 2 squares instead of just one. Like, you're only supposed to be able to jump one. It seems like one of those things that like was probably like a programming error, or it didn't end up working out the way it was like initially intended, and then they decided to make it a feature, not a bug. Because like there's definitely designed in there where you're supposed to jump around things and jump diagonally and stuff. So yeah, it feels like kind of playful in that way, where like you can kind of fuck with it and like mess around with it a little bit, which makes it does make it more fun, I think.
Yeah, it sort of gave me flashbacks to Wander Song because of its like, it felt like it would introduce mechanics that were just there just as an experiment, like just how does this work, which does give it sort of that like fun, playful like vibe, which you don't get out of mechanics very often.
Yeah.
And almost exclusively in these like very low budget indie games. But yeah, I know I used it many times in the maze zone to try and like skip over parts that I wasn't supposed to be able to because they were just like too wide gaps. And that's what makes me think that it is kind of intentional, or at least by the time that was designed, it was.
Yeah, like the hotel dungeon comes to mind. Like I feel like there was a whole lot of where you had spots where you had to like jump across gaps and stuff. So
Yeah.
I mean, it feels intentional to me.
Yeah, and then in the fucking I want to say it's in the circus dungeon.
Hmm.
There's like a room. There are many rooms that have those like smoke blowing machines.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the only way I could find to get across one of the rooms was to just wildly leap diagonally like across a huge chasm.
Yeah, is it the one that just doesn't have any dust?
Yes.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
It's so weird. Like it felt like I had soft lock myself. Like when I got in there, I was like, "How the fuck am I supposed to get back?" And then yeah, you just kind of like have to brute force it. Like you can either run through it while holding against the dust,
Or you could warp to the entrance.
or you can warp to the entrance. I'm not a quitter though. I pushed
Of course,
through.
of course.
I wanted to see if I could make a big jump, and it turns out I can after many attempts. That's another thing I do want to say. When you fall off of a ledge, you don't take damage. This is a good idea.
Yeah.
I'm glad they implemented it in this way and didn't make me restart the game 100,000 times.
Yeah, no, definitely the right call. But I guess since I just mentioned it, you do fight with a broom, and there is this like supplementary mechanic where there are like these dust balls that you can take, and you can use them to like block fire and walk on water, and a couple of other things. Which I thought was like an interesting mechanic. I kept thinking I was going to get the ability to generate one eventually, because it seemed like it's like a pretty central mechanic, but it never ends up happening. But like, I don't know, it feels really unique to me. Like I couldn't think of anything to like compare it to, and like at first, like early on in the game, I kept like kind of like mentally tuning them out. And then I would come back and be like, oh, yeah, there was, like, dust right here. Like, at the lake, I was like, oh, yeah, I could go across the lake because there's dust right there. And I just, like, wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah, it was interesting because, like, I kept thinking that it was going to introduce other abilities. Things like Rock Smash, HMO4, or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, it is all around the dust, and it doesn't tell you about it at all. You have to like figure it out yourself, which is putting more faith in. It was putting more faith in me than I deserve, because it took me a very long time to realize that you could surf with it.
Yeah.
But it's putting a lot more faith in players than you see very often, which I do kind of appreciate. But then, like, also, I don't know. There's probably a way to tutorialize this that would have been good.
Yeah.
Other than that, though, I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I don't think you have to do it to like the blue forest area with all the rabbits. I think like so. I think it just tutorializes it by like making an area that's impassable if you don't do that. Which I mean, it's like a decent way. I mean, like I imagine most people would figure it out. But it probably could have done it earlier. Probably be the thing, yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like it's maybe not necessary, but helpful to have in some of the earlier dungeons, like knowing that you can block off the shooter things that just blast lasers at you. There are definitely some puzzles that I did by not the correct way of doing it, where I just ran straight into stuff.
Yeah, like wildly jumping around.
Yeah. Well, that was before I even had jumped, right?
That's true,
like,
that's true.
So I remember there was a dungeon where like there was one of those things that was shooting down a hallway, and I was like, the only way I know to get through that is to just tank the damage and run straight through it. And so I would like pop out on the other side with like 2 health and be like, oh, Jesus, help me. And I did make it eventually. It wasn't until I think later in the same dungeon that I realized that you could grab the dust and put it in front of stuff.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember when I put the pieces together, but I think I maybe had a little bit of an easier time than that. But I definitely had my share, like, my fair share of moments where I just like brute force things. Because like, especially like if I don't know if we want to talk about it already, but like boss fights, I found that like most boss fights you could just like just tank damage and just spam the attack and make it through the boss fight like without much trouble.
Yeah, I had almost the exact same experience with every single boss, which is that I would go into the boss, die once, and then go through it the second time and beat it almost without taking damage most of the time.
Yeah.
Or that. I would just run in and be like, ah! Just keep smacking them. Yep. And eventually they go down. The wall, I think, is the one that is one that I killed on my first try.
Yeah.
Just because it was just, hitting a guy.
Yeah, so it definitely has that, like, you can just, like, damage boost or whatever you want to call that. Like, just tank damage and just, like, run through stuff pretty easily in a lot of cases. But
which is really, the game itself has... you get so much health.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so much health that it almost encourages it a lot of the time.
Yeah. I really like the heart piece mechanic in this, where it's like a little fairy flies in and then it just like becomes part of your health bar. Right. Like that it's like a little character in the world that just flies up to the UI and becomes part of your health. That's just like a fun touch, I think.
Yeah. I was shocked at like how quickly you get through them though, I think is my takeaway. Is I don't know. Like at the end of the game I had like the full 2 rows of health. Mm-hmm. And it's like I guess because the game itself is also short, it's like comparing it to a heart piece in Zelda, it doesn't have the grandeur because you just kind of bust them out. But
yeah, like the dungeons themselves are pretty short. Like you can play through like 3 of them in a sitting, and your health will go up quite a bit. And there's like bonus ones like in the overworld and stuff.
Right. Which is that's which a few of those are kind of interesting to get, I think. I mean, I don't want to talk about this zone. I guess we can.
Sure,
like
yeah.
Black and White Town.
Yeah.
That one has so much like that one was fun to get because in order to get into the house that you need to go through to get a card or whatever to open the gate, you have to like or at least I did. I don't know if you have to kill every member of the town, like the whole citizenry, which was pretty fucked.
Yeah,
in my opinion. Yeah, and like then you get rewarded at the end of it. It just feels, I don't know. It was a good way of putting me off my guard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I was one of the cards I didn't have, and because like when I first went to the area, like I think this is what's supposed to happen: is you walk up to a person to try to talk to them, and you stab them. And after that, I was like, oh, well, I'm not gonna do that anymore, and like just didn't stab anybody else except for maybe like someone by accident. But like,
Andy, you gotta stab them.
But then when I came back, like to get that card, I was like, oh, I guess I have to kill everybody. For the guy to move. And then
I did exactly the same thing, and then when he talks to you, I was like, okay, you forced my hand.
Yeah, one thing I didn't know, I learned this from a review that I watched, is after you kill them, if you walk up to the corpses, you can talk to them.
Yeah.
I just did not find that out myself.
Yeah. I don't know why I did it, but I definitely did do that. I think there's only a certain number of like different things that they can say,
right? And
mostly they want to make you feel bad for murdering them.
Of course, it is totally not okay to just murder them.
Yeah, as it turns out.
Yeah.
But you do get a prize for it. So who's really in the wrong here?
Who's the real animals?
Who's the real animal? Me or all these dead children?
So one thing I always wanted to bring up, like while we're talking about specific areas, is I don't know if it's called like the Red Sea or like you have it from the beach area, because like it starts off with this like eerie kind of area with the underpass and the whatever else, And then you go to like the more forested area, which is kind of more like what I was expecting the game to be like. And then you go to the beach, and it's got like the nice music, and I'm like really digging the vibe of the game at this point while I'm playing it. You know, I'm like, oh, cool beach area, nice. So you go to the beach. Yeah, you go to the fisherman who's standing like who's at the beach, like on the dock, and you go to talk to him, and you just push him with the broom twice, and he falls off, and you kill him. And then there's like a little whirlpool that you jump down to this like bottom of this red ocean weird zone with these big like creepy creatures walking around. I was like, oh, okay. Like
I felt like the creatures were very Dr. Seuss.
Yeah,
like that was the vibe I got from them.
Yeah, or like kind of like if Dr. Seuss designed like something like a creature for Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just that was like a really like impactful like moment for me with the game, like a surprise. I was like, oh, this weird like blood sea bottom of the ocean world.
Yeah, I also really like that dungeon because it incorporates like you go in and solve parts of it individually.
Yeah.
And then it I don't know, digs up,
yeah.
I guess, new parts of the dungeon to go to. Like it's just a very cool area conceptually, and I like a lot of the things they did with it.
Yeah. I think there's a dungeon in A Link Between Worlds. I think it's like where the Lost Woods is in Hyrule. Like in Lorule, there's a dungeon there which requires you to like go up into the woods and then like down into like a dungeon area and then up into the woods, and like you have to go like between two different like levels. Right. So I think that kind of stuff is cool, like having to move between the dungeon and the overworld. I think is really cool.
Yeah, and it's also super good as like a. It's also super good.
It's also super good.
Super good. It's great as a like an early dungeon because it compacts. It means that there's less like to explore in the dungeon. But by framing it in such a cool ass way, you don't even think about the fact that you're essentially completing like miniature dungeons. Mm-hmm. And then when you go to a different dungeon, the name of which I will totally remember at some point.
It would be nice
parts of it,
if the map said the names of the areas.
Oh, it would be so great.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you find that you have to like keep going back from place to place. And sort of a mirror of that, but not quite. It feels like it was sort of tutorializing that, but in an entirely invisible way.
Yeah. Making you think of the game world in a different way.
Yeah. And I don't know. It was just fun. And I like the red place with the big trees. It's pretty cool.
Which is probably supposed to be at the bottom of the ocean, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah.
So I guess, do you have any thoughts on like the Nexus? The fact that you got like a little like ethereal hub zone.
Yeah, I found I have positive and negative. I think that it was a cool place. Mm-hmm. In terms of like its design, and I like the fact that you could always go back to like the very beginning area with the road. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to. Like it was always just available and everything felt interconnected. I do wish there was just like a label on anything. You have to base where you're going on like what the sprite is.
Yeah. In one way, I find that sort of thing really satisfying. Like once you finally put forth the effort and you know what things are, you feel good about it. But yeah, like it's not worth that feeling. Like yeah, just labels would be nice.
It would be helpful. 'Cause yeah, like there are definitely several, especially like the difference between the main area and the dungeon. Mm-hmm. Like the dungeon in the forest part is called the temple,
right?
But the portal that goes to the temple dungeon is just gray rocks. Like it doesn't feel like a temple to me. It just feels like
a cave.
Yeah, a cave. And cave is another one, but those are brown rocks.
Of course.
So it's totally different. Yeah, I did wish it was easier to not just waste time, but that's also just sort of the things that I think about all games.
Right. Yeah, I like it when things can feel like more organic like that. So that gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah, because like as you said, like the world is actually all interconnected. Like you could move around it without warping if you wanted to.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna say probably on that. I'm just realizing that there might be places that you can't go back through, but maybe I'm wrong. I could
Yeah.
just be wrong about that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can't say that with 100% certainty, but it's at least mostly true.
Yeah, I know one of the cards that I went to was in the mountain, and you had to go like I didn't know how to get back out,
Mm.
and I just like warped out. I said, "Fuck it, I'm done." But maybe there is a way, and I just missed it. But yeah.
So I guess I wrote it down because I thought it might come up in conversation, so I'll just bring it up now as to not forget. But if you didn't know, Anodyne means not likely to provide dissent or offense, inoffensive or deliberately inoffensive. It is also a pain-killing drug or medicine. I had no idea what anodyne meant, so if anybody listening doesn't, it means inoffensive or it refers to pain-killing medicine.
Right.
So, and I think that is probably the one that it means to evoke is the painkillers.
The pain. That's what I was just gonna ask. Like, what do you think because I think so. Here's my interpretation of it.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to talk about the narrative, and there's nothing you can do about it. Haha.
Nana boo boo.
Nana boo boo. I believe that the overall thrust of the game, like in terms of its like message, is that Young is too passive and needs to sort of like act both for himself and also in concert with other people, like reach out and become more of an active person. I could be wrong about this, but like there's a very big like your friends help you do it, whatever, kind of a message throughout. And so that's sort of where I'm getting. I think they mean Anodyne like he is Anodyne. He is not like he is nothing. Like nobody would pay attention to him. He's not offensive. He's not standing out in any way. That's what I thought because I also had to Google the definition of anodyne.
Yeah, I think my interpretation is similar. It definitely feels like a self-reflective kind of dreamlike world that feels like it kind of represents like a kind of social anxiety maybe where it feels like he wants to kind of like hide away and like not interact with people because that's like the easier or safer thing to do. So it could be kind of like he's like killing his pain, like just like not interacting with people was my interpretation.
It's so multi-layered, actually. No, yeah, that's very possible. I think the game, to me at least, like not entirely dissimilar to Signalis, is a game that like intentionally obscures its like very literal meaning behind a in this case it's a dream. In that game it was sort of like also a dream, like
a simulation.
Simulation to make you like have you give pause and like actually think about it.
Yeah.
But because the game is so like Anodyne is so personal, I think like I feel like you have to be in a similar mental state to whoever the actual main character of the game is, whether that be Young or Briar,
right?
Like to really like grasp exactly what it is that it's trying to say. Like I found this more difficult to take a message out of than Signalis, and Signalis is a game that is like inspired by art house films.
Yeah, it felt a little bit clearer to me, but I mean, my interpretation might not be correct. Like the scene at the end, like you fight Briar, who seems to be like one of your friends, and after you beat him, he teaches you how to swim, and then you swim off into the sunset to go get a sandwich.
Yeah.
So like that kind of feels like I don't know, like I didn't want to read into it too deep. Like I think like actually like maybe like Young is like introverted and that like kind of like depressive state like needs to like force himself to go out and spend time with his friend was kind of how I interpreted it. And that feels
fair.
pretty concrete to me, but who knows?
Yeah. I had this stick up my ass about Briar being the actual person dreaming and that Young was like a construct, like
like his younger
character.
self or something.
Yeah, because Young isn't even like traditionally a first name, really.
Yeah,
it gave me like that's what I was thinking.
That's totally
like,
possible.
Yeah, but I don't know. That very well could be me just trying to insert meaning where there isn't any. But yeah, I mean that's why I wanted to talk about the stories, because it's just like, to me it feels so close to being understood by me.
Yeah.
And yet just out of my grasp.
Yeah, like,
and
I would
I'm
almost
not sure why.
Yeah, compare it more to something like a short hike, but just much more abstract. Like a character that feels like they need to like do some like introspective self-improvement by going off and like having this little adventure.
Right. Which makes sense. And also you do climb a mountain.
You do climb a mountain.
So they stole the idea.
Are you yeah. Ripping off Anodyne since whenever the short hike came out. So are you aware of like the post game stuff you can do with the swap ability?
No.
Okay.
I know that you can use it to collect other cards, and my guess is that you can just move those rocks around.
Yeah, like so it lets you move. It's like swap any 2 tiles in the game. And yeah, like literally, it like just busts the game wide open and lets you just go out of bounds into the void of the game, and in fact encourages you to and requires you to get the cards. Then once you get, I think there's 48 of them, and then there's a secret 49th one that you have to glitch the game to get. It's like off to, like a platform off to the side of the gate, and you have to like swap between the 2 screens, like on the border, while pushing forward, and it like makes you inch forward. And it's like this intentional glitch in the game that this like card was designed around for you to like use that ability to get to it, to get the last one. Then that gate opens, and then there's a gate that requires 50 cards. But there isn't a 50th card in the game. It's just there to make you reflect on it being about the journey and not the destination, I guess.
Where is the gate?
It's like in some out of bounds area.
Oh, it's just like
I
around.
think, yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
so you have to use the swap ability to get to it.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. That's very cool. That makes me think of like Bob Is You, like how there are levels like hidden on the overworld and stuff.
Yeah, a little bit. It definitely has that like cool indie game. Oh, you can actually find a portal that will warp you to the debug menu, and you can just like walk around it and like interact with it.
They should have incorporated, not that necessarily, but some of the swap stuff, I think, into the part of the game that is required to see the credits.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Like the fact that they just make you do that one little tile puzzle, like it does feel like there should have been like a whole dungeon that used this ability. Like keep it like a more restricted use than just letting you break the whole game, but still like actually like let you use it, and then like maybe have some parts where you can go out of bounds and stuff.
And
like,
then let it break the whole game after you've completed the game, which
yes.
is what it already does.
So yeah, like let the dungeon where you use it like seed the idea that you can use it to get out of bounds, and then once you beat it, you'll want to go explore.
Yeah, because yeah, I did want to some extent go test the swap power out, but then another part of me was like, well, I just saw the credits.
Yep.
And I'm not going to, like, go get all the cards. That's not what I'm here for. And I genuinely don't think I would have found it enjoyable to do.
Yeah.
So like that is like to me that's like a big, because for some people, for the big Anodyne fans out there, for the
Yes.
people who did write that wiki,
The Fanodynes.
for the Fanodynes out there, they probably, that's probably something they tell someone to convince them to play the game.
Yeah.
They're like, and then at the end there's like this secret power that lets you just like rip the whole world apart. And I would go, if I was the one being spoken to, I'd be like, that's fucking sick. Because it is. But then you just like in a normal playthrough would never do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it has big like podcast syndrome for me, where like I feel like if we weren't doing the podcast, I was just playing it for fun, I would totally do it. But I have that feeling of I have to move on to the next game.
Right.
That will prevent me from doing it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Because I obviously have the same. I feel like I have the opposite experience sometimes, though. Like when I play a game casually, unless it's RimWorld, I have a tendency to just sort of like go through it and be done.
Yeah, well, yeah, like this is like my kind of game, though.
True,
like I would want to keep playing this if there was like extra shit to do. But no, I'm the same way. Like most games, I hit the credits and I'm like.
Yeah, those credits are a great motivator to not do other stuff in a game. At least for me. At least these days. I don't know. Let us know how you think about it in the comments. Is there anything... music? I think did a very good job of emulating the era.
Yeah. And it has that, like, surreal, like, moody... dreamy, like atmospheric quality. Like there are some like really great tracks in this, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, as always, all we have to say about that.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think you've made comments before about how like indie games can really impress with their music, like especially for a game that originally came out in 2013. Like I don't know, I assume like the music was remastered, but like. At least, yeah, in the remastered version, I think the music is very impressive for what the game is. Better than you would expect looking at it, I think.
I would say my one other thing is like, were there any parts of like dungeons, bosses, that kind of thing that you think stood out above the rest, or at least like warrant mentioning? I will say that like. On the topic of bosses, like I think we both had the same experience with most of them. The final boss is such like a comical rise in complexity. Not that it's like absurdly hard. I think it took me like 3 tries or something to beat. But like compared to hit a thing to what you have to do to complete the final boss, which involves like reflecting attacks and like moving the dust so that it explodes in front of the cold one, like it's such a huge step up compared to the rest of it that I found it kind of funny.
Yeah, definitely the same experience for me. I was like, oh man, I had to like actually dodge stuff. That's not a thing I've had to do in combat, really.
Right.
Before this. So yeah, it was a big step up in complexity, but like I thought it was actually a pretty well designed fight. It was like pretty satisfying to learn. Took me a few more tries. Took me, for some reason, like moving the dust in front of the ice one took me a while to figure out.
There, the third iteration of that, where there are multiple of the like no dust here zones on the map, I literally never figured out how to do.
You put the dust like right in between them, and then it'll hit it, and the explosion's big enough. I did it by accident once. That's how I figured it out. Yeah.
So I was like, I think mine happened on accident as well. Like I was just like, I don't know what to do, just like mashing the button to put it there, and ended up getting it. Which I don't know. That could be maybe one negative thing to say about it, but I agree. I thought it was a fun boss. Most of the other bosses, while cool, I think mostly is because of their designs, and not necessarily because of the fights themselves. And so it was a step up in that way too.
Yeah, I don't think any of the other bosses really stood out to me at all. But I will say I liked the hotel dungeon. Probably was my favorite I like the elevator, like as a central mechanic. I think that's really cool. And then like certain floors you had to like move up and down between with the stairs. Like it
Yeah.
had more of that kind of like you had to think about the whole layout of the dungeon sort of thing going on. So
Yeah.
that was the highlight for me.
I would agree, except I think I like the apartment a little bit better.
Mm.
That would be. I do really like the hotel as well. I would put it on par with like most of the earlier dungeons, which I think are really like very good.
Yeah.
For me, the two standouts though are, I think the apartment with the switch puzzles and having to navigate the silverfish around.
Yeah.
Was just fun and like a difference in kind. And then the circus one, which it just is like a different game for a while. Like it's so much harder. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot more going on. All of the mechanics are being implemented at once and including new stuff that you don't really see anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my standouts, and I don't even know how I feel about the circus one. Like I think it is
I didn't really
cool.
like it that much.
Yeah, but it ended up being so hectic that I didn't feel like I ever really had a grasp on it.
Yeah.
Do we have Silverfish thoughts?
My silverfish thoughts are I'm glad to have finally played this. It's been on my radar for like fucking ever. And I was correct in my suspicions that I would enjoy it. But albeit in like different ways than I expected. I think this game is really great tonally and atmospherically. We did compare it to like Earthbound. I do think it kind of fits into that lineage of indie games that are inspired by Earthbound. And it was a lot of fun to play. Like I think it has like that focus on exploration that like you always want out of like a Zelda inspired game. And yeah, it doesn't feel too derivative. Like it kind of does its own thing. I like that the world is like interconnected, and that like yeah, it doesn't. I have all those like Zelda power ups like we were talking about. It kind of has like a simple core that's strong, that it kind of like builds this like exploration and discovery kind of based game around, and I think it just excels really well, like for an indie game, especially like one that started as a student project by two people. Like I think it just turned out like incredibly well, and was like very successful and interesting. So like it's one of those kind of indie games that I find inspiring and makes me want to make a game. So yeah, super up my alley and didn't disappoint. I had a really good time with it.
Yeah, this game is one of my favorite kinds of game, which is the indie game with a concept that is off the beaten path. In this case, like, what if you did Zelda, but it took place in a dream? Which isn't, as it turns out, there was a path there, but it was only beaten one time. And it's one that understands its scope and scale a lot. This game is almost perfectly tuned around like its project size, where it is like 6 to 7 hours, 6.5, somewhere in that vicinity to complete. It feels like you have a full game on your plate when you're playing it. It feels good to go through. It creeps its complexity only very slightly over what it is capable of delivering on, and in some ways it does it intentionally in sort of like a fun, joking way. So I don't know. It's weird to ascribe a specific personality to a game, but like it does feel like this is a game that is just here to have like a fun time with you. And even like in its more serious or its darker moments, like there is a core of playfulness to this that makes it just a really fun time all the way through. So I also really like it. It is not specifically up my alley in terms of its genre and whatever, but 100% I think that even if you are not in the target audience, I think you would still enjoy this. So full on good game. I always keep wanting to throw like a rating or something in, even though it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't know exactly when it started happening, but you've been like recommending games.
Yeah. I'm like, I'd give this one a recommend. I'm going to give this a fun time out of 73. Thank you for listening to NOCLIP Pocket this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're going to be talking about Rollerdrome, a fucking rollerblading shoot 'em up game that I've been wanting to play since the very second I heard about it, but have not yet. So I'm very excited to see what it's all about.
Samesies. Have nothing more to add. I know even less about it than that.
Yeah. But until that time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro. There you can find links to our Twitter account, our email address, the YouTube channel, and you can listen to any of our old episodes, including ones that we've done on Link's Awakening. Would be one to go for. Every other Zelda game ever made.
Yep, or if you're listening to this in the future, we're doing an episode on Tunic coming
That's
up.
true, which should be similar to this.
We have a lot on Undertale and Deltarune, Earthbound.
Which, one more time, we should get to that Deltarune episode too at some point. Fortunately, they have not released any more of it, so we're not like a game behind at this point, but we'll get there. Keep your eyes out for that. And sweep that like button.
Swap. No. I can't figure that one out. Swap a negative comment for a positive comment in the comments section. And climb to the top of the windmill to ring that bell.
Like Quasimodo.
Yes.
Except it was just a bell tower. It wasn't a windmill. But you know,
it was in fact Notre Dame Cathedral. The most famous windmill ever built.
So famous they even took it out of service as a windmill. Not a lot of people know that. Was a windmill at one point.
Knowing that which Pokemon is green and counting to 6. Things that Chad knows how to do.
These are my greatest skills.